Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Hour from a brand new location. You guys are gonna have to tell me if the audio is weird or anything like that, because I'm using my cousin's equipment while I'm staying in Minnesota here for a wrestling thing. But yeah, still want to stay consistent with the streams. So here we are. I've got some good things to react to today. Some good things people sent me in the Discord. We've got an article about modern art and its connection to the CIA and how modern art was used as essentially a tool to attack the Soviet Union and try and portray Western capitalist society as more free than the Soviet Union. So we're going to talk about that. And then we'll also talk about what's going on in Africa some more, debunk some Philip DeFranco NATO propaganda videos about Africa, and it should be great. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll jump right into our show after the intro. All right, looks like we got some people filing in. I accidentally scheduled the stream for like 12:10 or something Central Time, so my bad on that. That might have thrown some people off, but yeah, we're here. How's it going, everybody? Got Jacob in the chat, got Jai in the chat, Jude. Thank you for all the work you do, Eddie, as well as the Midwestern Marx Institute. Do you have any U.S. communist parties that you support? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. 1 second, Jude. I really think that PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, like they have their problems, but they're doing a lot of good work, especially ideologically. I think it's a lot of like movementism and like activism, going to protests rather than trying to go to the working class, rather than going to workplaces and forging ties with like union leaders and stuff. So that's my main critique of them. And I've got a whole bunch of critiques of my own party, the CPUSA, but yeah, we're working to make it better. Every communist party, especially every party in the U.S., is deeply flawed right now. They need to return to policies of democratic centralism, and there needs to be a lot more theoretical education within the parties. But join one if you want to get involved, and they'll probably give you things to do. But yeah, there's all I'll say, and I'm limited in what I can say, but all I'll say is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in making these parties effective and efficient, and parties that advance the class struggle in this country. But I mean, they're not going to change by just sitting around and waiting for them to change. They're going to change by people getting into the parties and demanding that they return to a policy of democratic centralism, meaning democracy when it comes to decision making, but then once you decide on a decision democratically, you have unity of action, right? A lot of the decisions in CPUSA simply aren't being made democratically. There's a lot of higher ups in the party who would rather tail Democrats than get to the workers, get to the masses. So yeah, that's a problem that needs to be solved. But yeah, like I said, you're not going to solve it by just sitting around. So just be aware, Just be aware that there are problems with every party. So, RWJ nurses are striking in my city in New Jersey. Nice, that's cool. We'll have to look into that at some point. Dang, you got a card from CBUSA? I did. I don't know if they give out cards normally, but yeah, they wanted me to use the card for like TikTok videos and stuff. And it helps to just pull out the card and have it there, so it's pretty cool. I don't know if rank and file members can get one. I mean, I'm sure you can. Like, obviously, they have the ability to make them, so yeah. Do we really want that? The title? CPUSA? Why not? Why not? They're the oldest and most internationally recognized and domestically recognized party, socialist or communist party, in the United States by a lot. They've got a lot of legitimacy. They've got a lot of resources. And yeah, why would we lie about what we are and what we believe? You know, yeah, I don't really buy into that argument of let's stop calling socialism socialism so we can trick people into believing it. Like, no, let's just convince them that socialism makes sense. Um, as someone new to this channel, why is communism better? Because capitalism's contradictions allow capitalism to produce a lot, but because the system is based in exploitation, it'll never, ever, ever on its own solve the problems of poverty, mass hunger, mass homelessness, government corruption, right? This can only have, or we can only alleviate these things if we start taking control of our economy, if we start planning our economy, if we nationalize, say, the oil companies, right? And these giant, giant industries run by Wall Street shareholders, banks, and oligarchs who then lobby and control our government directly and indirectly, and also control the production of information, the news, right? The only way that we can eliminate these evils that we see in our society today is by changing the capitalist mode of production. These evils stem from the capitalist mode of production and its inefficiencies, its irrationality, and just the way that it functions overall. So, we need to start transitioning to a new system, like they're kind of starting to do in Africa. So take the education I paid for to not be poor. That would be irrelevant in communism. No, communism doesn't mean a society with absolutely no hierarchies, right? It means a society where you can rise in society. You can become, you can chase whatever profession you're into, or you can chase success in your career field. But it won't be based on exploitation, or to rise up in the economy, you won't have to exploit other people, right? Because the way that capitalism works is you're either a worker who's exploited, who's having the vast majority of the value that your labor creates taken by a capitalist who doesn't work as profit. And then the only way to escape that, and the only way to become comfortable, is to become a capitalist yourself, to find some way to own the means of production yourself so you can exploit other people, right? In a socialist system, and this is even how like the Soviet Union worked. Doctors were the highest paid people in Soviet society. Scientists, people who did the most important, the most intensive, and the most high skilled jobs were the highest paid. Under capitalism, the highest paid people are folks who own capital, right? It's Wall Street investors, it's swindlers, it's people who are the best exploiters, it's people who have ownership in insurance companies. And doctors and such are still paid well, but a lot of actually the way that a lot of the healthcare system has ended up working under capitalism is doctors basically have to become small business owners. A lot of physicians own their own practices, or they work for these jumbo healthcare systems that are owned by Bill Gates and other super wealthy shareholders who don't know anything about healthcare. Right? Socialism is when agriculture and farming and farm equipment is owned by the farmers, the agricultural laborers, the manufacturing workers who create the equipment, rather than shareholders who know nothing about farming, right? Like a ton of the farmland in the United States is owned by Bill Gates. The hell does Bill Gates know about farming, right? But because he owns capital, because he owns the means of production, he's able to profit greatly off of the agricultural laborers, the farmers, the people actually working the land, who actually understand the act of farming, the labor of farming. So socialism, or the eventual system of communism, is one that rewards you for the labor that you do, not for owning means of production and exploiting the labor of others. There's as quick of an explanation as I can give you, but obviously we have like over 1,000 videos. This is actually, and I wish I had my stream deck with me so I could play the round of applause sound effect, but I didn't bring it with me while I'm traveling. This is the 3-year anniversary of our Midwestern Marx YouTube channel. So we've been at it for 3 years. If you want more about the basics of Marxism and the basics of socialism, you can check out any of our videos, but we have a basics of Marxism class now, taught by Noah Kratchvik, who's been studying this stuff for years. And yeah, you can go watch that and get a far more in-depth explanation than what I just gave you. CPUSA has some really good clubs too. I'm in Colorado and it's not too shabby. Yeah, the clubs kind of act however they want. Like the clubs are given a lot of freedom, which I wish the party worked more, based on democratic centralism, like I said, where you have like all the clubs vote on decisions made by national. But instead it's like really decentralized, and certain clubs just kind of do their thing, do whatever they want, and they kind of have the freedom to do that. But that leads to a situation where some of the clubs are really good and some of the clubs are just campaigning for Democrats, right? Like neoliberal Democrats. So it's really, really hit and miss depending on your area. But that's what I mean by like getting involved with the party and pushing your club towards a real Marxist, a real socialist position, and away from these positions of just tailing the neoliberal Democrats. Africa will rise like China did 100 years ago. Nobody could have guessed the prosperity and wealth that China has achieved. Africa and its many different people is the future. I agree. I mean, there's no continent with as much wealth, as much material wealth as Africa. It's just that it's been exploited rather than invested in developing their infrastructure, developing their industry, developing the African economy. And anytime you have a leader like Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Muammar Gaddafi, who wants to, say, create an African developmental bank, or who wants to start developing African infrastructure and industry and, moving towards a more prosperous economic model, a less exploitative economic model, the U.S. and the CIA tends to kill them. Gaddafi was killed by a NATO intervention and U.S.-backed extremist rebels. Sankara was killed in a coup that was backed by France, Belgium, and the U.S., I believe, were the people who were responsible for that, orchestrating that. Lumumba, same thing. So, the fact that, and now you have China, through the Belt and Road Initiative, providing developmental loans to all these countries, basically going ahead with a similar plan to what Gaddafi wanted to do. I mean, Gaddafi wanted to create, it's different because Gaddafi wanted to create, an African developmental bank specifically, right? A bank in Africa that funds development in African countries. And, now they're being financed heavily by China, but the loans are set up very similar to how the Marshall Plan loans were set up when the U.S. after World War II was trying to rebuild their allies in West Europe, and they were giving them developmental loans focused on equity, meaning stuff that makes more money. So productive capital, industry, manufacturing, things that are going to help these countries in the long run at about 4% interest rates, right? That's about the interest rate of the developmental loans that China is giving to Africa. And it's helping them develop their manufacturing base. It's helping them develop their industry. It's helping them modernize. And the U.S. is going crazy about it, right? They can't stand that China's just financing developing, and their economies continuing to grow to the point where, like you said, they're so prosperous that nobody could have even expected this 100 years ago. People would be mind blown if 100 years ago you told them that China is going to abolish relative poverty in 100 years. Right? That would sound like so far-fetched, but that's what they've done. That's what the socialist economy in China has done. And now that they've developed themselves, they're financing their allies. They're financing Iran. They're financing development in Russia. They're financing development all over Africa, in these countries that for years have been prevented from developing their productive forces, developing their industrial base by the US dominated global financial system, by the US State Department and US government and US intelligence agencies directly, through coups and other regime change efforts, been prevented by NATO. And this is what Lenin says in Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, which I have a full reading guide for on our YouTube channel, a reading guide and summary. If you're too lazy to read the book, you'll get the basic gist of it by watching my reading guide. But he said, what capitalist imperialism does is it prevents countries from developing, right? Because the surplus of that country is being sucked out by Western multinationals. The profit and the value of African people's labor has largely been taken back to the West for years, which is how West Europe and the US have been able to develop or have been able to accumulate so much wealth. That's a big reason for it. But now that they're able to develop their own industry and their own infrastructure, that surplus is staying in Africa more so. And now you see political changes following that, like what's been going on in West Africa recently. And the US is freaking out about it. They're like, no, how dare you? How dare you develop yourselves and not give all of your mineral wealth to shareholders on Wall Street? The West needs to be destroyed for communism to succeed. Again, Eric, every time you say this, I ask you, what does that mean? What does the West being destroyed mean? The West is always going to be a thing. Latin America could be considered the West. It's in the Western Hemisphere. Like, what do you think America and West Europe are going to implode? They don't need to be destroyed. They need to be sublated. This is very basic Marxism and very basic Hegelian dialectics, right? There's never going to be a total collapse of the West where it's just destroyed and all the people here just leave or die or whatever, right? What we need to do is have the workers in the West seize power over our government, create a worker state, create a state with a foreign policy similar to China's, that's based on mutual development and complete non-interventionism, right? That's what needs to happen. And if that's what you mean by the destruction of the West, then yes, I agree with you. But I don't think that should be described as destruction, right? And nobody in the West is going to get on board with you saying, let's burn the American flag and tear our entire country down, right? People need construction, not destruction, right? We don't want to say, let's burn America to the ground. We want to say, let's go with an alternative, right? Capitalism isn't working. Our country has been co-opted by big banks, corporations, and the deep state. What we need is a different economic model, a different path forward, and where America's not constantly involved in regime change efforts everywhere, and where we take care of our working people, where we prioritize our working people above the money grubbers on Wall Street, right? But that's not destruction. That's not the West being destroyed. That's the West being sublated. And the only way you're never going to organize workers by running around saying destroy America. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. Repeating national nihilist jibber jabber. Yeah, that's what that is national nihilism, right? The history of every country, especially every capitalist country, is a history of exploitation, a history of enslaving other people, a history of exploiting others for their labor, a history of imperialism and colonization, right? Russia was an imperialist country when the Bolsheviks took power, when the October Revolution happened. And one of the ways they were able to organize a lot of the military personnel was by saying, why are you fighting in these stupid wars for the czar, for the monarchs? Right? These are just, you're being sent to fight and die in wars that are just for the accumulation of the monarchy and the aristocracy. And a lot of the people said, yeah, we're going to join the Bolsheviks. We're going to fight for socialism. We're going to fight for a workers' state. Why don't we do the same thing in America? right? Why don't we go to these people who come back from wars with PTSD, or who are, pushed into joining the military by poverty or by a desire to go to college and not be drowning in debt? And say, why are you going to Iraq? Why are you going to Afghanistan? Why are you going to Qatar to guard the oil and, fight for, the war in Afghanistan is over now, but why are you going to guard the oil and fight for the capital accumulation of these oil oligarchs and others? And we can win them to our side that way. That's the strategy. Not just condemning everything and hating everything and calling for everything to be destroyed and wiped out, because it doesn't make any sense, right? Or saying that America's history is so bad, the West's history is just so morally bad that we can never have socialism. Like, that's not Marxism, right? Marxism is not a moral philosophy, right? Every country has historical evils, right? But the solution, the answer is for every country to move towards socialism, move towards a controlled system of production where we take care of the people rather than exploit the people. Uphold the Midwestern Marxist-Leninist analysis. The West must end its geopolitical domination of the global South. Thank you so much, Kyle, for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you so much. I say this every time, but these super chats are essential to what we do at the Institute, to our publishing press, to helping me, Carlos, and Noah survive. Actually, Noah's pretty stable, but yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate you all. What I mean is that Western governments need to be destroyed entirely. Yeah, that's what sublation is. The governments need to be destroyed and they need to be replaced by worker states. Right? But that's not. Do you know what the word sublate means? To sublate something means to qualitatively change it by keeping some of the good aspects of it and, getting rid of other negative elements, getting rid of some of the contradictions. Right? But the West will still exist after sublation, right? It's not destroyed. It's not like the West is sucked into a black hole. It just becomes something new, something qualitatively new, right? That's the essence of Marxism. And that's the essence of socialist revolution, is let's sublate our country, keep its good aspects, ameliorate, or whatever the word is, get rid of its bad aspects, and create something new and better. France is a communist country. I don't think so. I don't think that makes any sense. France has always been a country dominated by finance capital. Even as far back as 1917, the country has had very little productive infrastructure. Very not much of an industrial base. It's basically dominated by banking and finance, and this has been the case for a long, long time. But it is absolutely a capitalist country. In no way, shape, or form could France be described as a communist country. What do you mean by that? Just because France is like dictatorial, because the government is autocratic? Is that what you mean? I mean, that stems from capitalism. That stems from the fact that their country's economy is dominated by finance capital, which means that their country's politics is then dominated by finance capital, that these bankers and finance capitalists largely control the French government and use it to, quell protests, suppress working class uprisings, and things like that, right? But that's capitalism, and capitalism is an incredibly autocratic system. Sublate the state. Love it. Love the panel you guys did with RBN. Sweet. I'm glad that you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, shout out to RBN, the Revolutionary Blackout Network. I'm sure most of you are already following them, but they did a labor summit recently, and we were invited. Chris Smalls was there, a bunch of other really cool YouTube people. So that was a lot of fun. We had talked about doing a labor summit in the past, but it was just like, how do we even organize something like that? But leave it to the RBN guys. They figured out how to organize something like that, and they put it on before we could even do it. So they're killing it every day. So yeah, good for them. Too much taxes. Taxes are a way of funding the capitalist state, right? Taxes are a way of funding the government, which works as a tool for suppressing the working masses, keeping the working masses in their place, keeping the working masses working, suppressing rebellion, suppressing uprisings, things like that, on behalf of the ruling economic class, which in France is finance capitalist. Really everywhere it's finance capitalist. But, so the taxes that, like, say the taxes we pay in America are mostly used to fund the war machine, right? They're mostly used to fund wars of accumulation abroad, like the Iraq War, that only help the Koch brothers and other giant oil oligarchs, right? That only help Wall Street shareholders, that only help the military industrial complex, right? So under a capitalist system, a lot of your taxes aren't actually invested in you. And this is, one of the critiques I have of like AOC and Bernie and the Social Democrats who just say, let's just increase billionaire taxes. Like, yeah, you also have to reinvest where those taxes are going, though, because under a capitalist system, taxes are used for subsidies for people like Elon Musk. It's a way of sucking more money out of the working class and giving it to the ruling class, or putting it towards ruling class or things that benefit the ruling class, like the endless wars that we see in America. Right, so taxes aren't communism. Communism is when the working class takes power of the government and builds an economy that benefits the working class. Taxes are a part of capitalism. They've always been a part of capitalism. And don't get me wrong, taxes do pay for good things, right? Like taxes are used to pay for education and stuff like that. So, I'm not saying just stop paying your taxes or whatever, but taxes are not communism. Related to this stream topic, will an eventual violent struggle between Africa and China and the old imperialist order be inevitable? Thank you so much, Jude, for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you so much. Already made $10 in this stream. Holy cow, we're making bank. The Midwestern Marx Institute will soon be the wealthiest people's funded institute in the history of socialism. But thank you all. And before I answer this question, I was thinking the other day, like watching some Daily Wire commentators who like blew up in a year. Like, imagine how easy it would be if you were a liberal or a Republican and you could take money from corporate donors and corporate investors. Like how much marketing we'd be able to do. I'd be able to hire an editor. I'd be able to do all this crap. But our institute has to be totally people funded, totally worker funded, because that's who we're advocating for. Right? We would never take money from a corporation who wanted to influence our message, who wanted to change our message in any way, which is, a lot of them. That's why a lot of corporations invest in media like that. So it just makes it's like fighting an uphill battle. It's like we have to work twice as hard, at least twice as hard, way more than twice as hard to get, the same amount of followers, but it's worth it and we're doing it and the grind continues. Related to this stream topic, okay, an eventual struggle between rising Africa and China and the old imperialist order. Yeah, I think maybe it's hard to say. I mean, obviously it's impossible to predict the future. I think for sure China knows that that's a possibility because they've been building up their military capacity for a long time. There's definitely going to be more conflict here between the U.S. and Africa. Like we're going to talk about, the U.S. is already floating the idea of invading Africa, invading Niger, to stabilize things, aka make sure that, Africa stays in its current state where Western corporations basically have free reign to extract their resources, and where a lot of the African leaders are puppet governments of the West. So there's definitely going to be conflict there. We see the U.S. building up military capacity in the South China Sea, increasing sanctions on China, and increasing hostilities day after day. Will that erupt into an all-out war? I hope not, but it's obviously very possible. I think it might look more like the Cold War, where there's all these proxy conflicts going on, like in Niger, where you have China backing development and the U.S. trying to maintain their system of exploitation, and that leading to military conflicts. I think we're going to see a lot of that, like proxy wars, similar even to what's going on in Ukraine right now with NATO leading a proxy conflict against the Russian army directly. So I think there will be things. Ukraine's the closest that we've come. to a direct conflict between the rising multipolar East and global South versus the Western imperialist hegemon, which is why Ukraine is the most consequential and important geopolitical conflict in the world right now. But will that erupt into World War III? Impossible to predict, but we're always on the brink of that, right? Even right now, Ukraine is doing certain things to try, like Zelensky is basically a cornered animal, and he's doing certain things to try and get NATO to enter that conflict directly, which would then pull in all of the NATO countries, all of the US and their allies. And of course, that would probably lead Russia's allies to get more involved, or Russia to get more involved militarily, and that would be World War III and the end of Western civilization as we know it. But that's definitely a possibility, scary times. But this is why it's so important what socialists in the West are doing, right? Because we don't have to worry about World War III if there's a working class uprising in the US that takes power of our government, that takes it back from the neocons and the neoliberals, that takes it back from Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland, Antony Blinken, and all these psychopaths who run our government right now, who seem hell-bent on pushing us as close as they possibly can towards nuclear warfare, right? If we seize power and turn America into a worker state, well, we can join BRICS then, right? We can just start trading with China then. We can end this threat and this constant expansion of the NATO-US capitalist sphere of influence in the world. So that's why it's important. And that's what, revolutionaries in the global South have been telling us for years, right? Like, if you guys have a revolution in America, right? If you move America away from being this capitalist imperialist hegemon, that makes the job of revolutionaries internationally, revolutionaries around the world, so much easier. Because they don't have to worry about getting taken out by the CIA. They don't have to worry about the US invading their country and toppling their government. They don't have to worry about NATO carpet bombing them for trying to feed their people and teach them to read. So our job here in the West is extremely important. And that's why it's so silly when people say, oh, if you love communism so much, bud, why don't you move to Cuba? Because my job is here, because I live here, because I know that communism would make Cubans' lives much easier, or socialism in America would make Cuban people's lives easier, and it would massively improve the lives of everyone who I love and everyone who I care about, who my friends and family in this country, in America, right? It's not just about ideologically thinking that communism is better, so therefore Cuba is better and I'm going to move to Cuba so I can live comfortably. No, it's understanding, what America moving to socialism would mean for so many working people in this country, how it would massively improve the lives of millions and millions of working class Americans, and how it would improve the international situation, how it would, take us away from, or how it would end the threat of moving towards World War III, right? There's nowhere more important for socialists to be doing what they're doing, to be educating people and organizing people, than in America. Plus, Cuba's under a crippling embargo by the United States. I appreciate your optimism and hoping the communists are able to seize control of the USA before we go off the deep end and start World War III. But isn't global conflict what precipitated the 1917 revolution? It is. It is. That's a good point. But, it's a different situation. It's a different context. But yeah, like I said, one of the Bolsheviks' organizing strategies was you don't want to go fight in World War I, right? You don't want to fight. This is a battle between all the imperialist powers over the colonies. That's what World War I was. It was them fighting over their colonial territories. It was them fighting for economic supremacy, all the capitalist imperialist nations. So the Bolsheviks used that to organize workers and say, look, why would you want to go fight for the colonies? Why would you want to go fight and die for rich people when we get to have a worker state that takes care of you? So, in our situation today, in our current geopolitical context, we can say the same thing, right? Do you want these psychopaths to push us towards World War III, right? Do you want Victoria Nuland, the Clintons, and all these, and Biden, and all these insane wealthy people, these insane neocons and neoliberals, to push us towards World War III? That'll devastate so many lives. Of course not. So you can use global conflicts, different global conflicts, to organize people. And maybe a global conflict does break out. Maybe World War III does break out, and maybe that's what it takes for communists in the U.S. to get serious, and for people to take the idea seriously and realize how terrible our existing system actually is, how horrible the neoliberal capitalist mode of production that we currently have actually is. I hope not, though. Right? We're not there yet, so but it is a possibility. Great questions, Jude. Thank you so much. Kyle Pettis, another super chat. We're blowing up today. Let's go. Thank you, Kyle. Kyle's a hardworking trucker, hardworking labor organizer. So he's driving truck during the day for measly wages and then giving them to the Midwestern Marx Institute to further the struggle for socialism. What a guy. I wish I could hit the applause button again. We give Kyle a round of applause. Want to match the first-time donors with reason, because this is such an important, timely topic with the Sahel and the EFF and the BRICS summits. Yes, this is all. The situation is changing day by day, right? And we're maybe inching closer towards like an actual armed conflict, an actual war. But China is doing everything they can to avoid that. And yeah, with everything that's going on in Africa right now, this is a major turning point. It's extremely important because that's a lot of countries in Africa overthrowing what are absolutely nothing other than Western puppet dictatorships, like the government currently in charge of Nigeria, who said they might invade Niger after their revolution/coup that just happened. But all these Western puppet dictatorships are being overthrown, and of course, these countries are going to turn to China. They're going to turn to Russia. They're going to turn to the BRICS countries, and they didn't used to be able to do that. The global financial system for years has been dominated by the IMF and the World Bank. So, like when Chile moved towards socialism, when Salvador Allende was elected, they were used to getting $200 million a year in funding from the IMF and the World Bank. And that was the only global financial system that you had access to at that time, that any country had access to. And, the IMF and the World Bank were created in 1949, I believe, or after World War II for that explicit purpose, to give the U.S. and Western bankers unprecedented control over the global financial system, over who gets financing to develop and who doesn't. And then, of course, they did their structural adjustment loans and their debt trapping techniques and acted as tools of imperialism and economic warfare themselves. But Chile was getting $200 million a year from them. And then when Allende was elected, that was dropped to $2 million. Richard Nixon said, make the economy scream. And all of Chile's financing was cut. So what kind of situation does that leave a country in then, right? When they're used to getting all this financing, and now they have to keep the economy going, meet people's needs, and try to construct socialism while being totally cut off from the outside world, cut off from outside funding and financing. And then, of course, the IMF, World Bank, and this U.S.-dominated global financial system also enforces sanctions, as does the U.S. military presence everywhere around the world. Sanctions are ultimately an old-fashioned siege tactic where the U.S. just surrounds countries with their military and doesn't let any trade get in or out. But the global financial system is part of that too, because it cuts countries off from many banks that are dominated by the West, which is almost all the global banks. There are thousands of little tentacle banks that are connected to the IMF and World Bank and Western bankers. So countries were left, in this tough situation where you're trying to build socialism without financing. So, a lot of them partnered with the USSR, like obviously in Cuba. They really could only produce sugar and tobacco because that's what the colonizers had been producing in Cuba for years. So the USSR said, we're going to buy all your sugar from you, right? Similar thing with the DPRK. But then when the Soviet Union collapsed, the situation got much, much worse because they had no one to buy that sugar and no one to finance with. But now, thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative, thanks to China, that's not the case, right? When there's a coup in Niger, It's not like Niger is totally cut off from the global financial system and they have a million sanctions enforced on them and the country collapses, right? Instead of that, Niger has this coup. They overthrow the Western puppet dictatorship and they go, we're trading with China and Russia and Iran and the BRICS countries and Brazil and all these countries who are a part of it. Right, so they have an alternative to the IMF and World Bank. They have an alternative to the Western-dominated financial system, which is why it's so ridiculous when Western socialists condemn China and say China's debt trapping these countries, China's using finance capital. That's not real socialism. It's like, look at the global context. Since 1949, since the end of World War II, the entire global financial system has been dominated by the US or Western banks, and it's been able to cut countries off from financing. It's been able to wage economic warfare against countries. So what China's doing is looking at that global situation and providing an alternative to Western finance. Right? So it's not capitalism because China's using finance capital. It's them directly combating capitalism. It's them giving countries an alternative to the high interest rate predatory loans of the IMF and World Bank. All I can spare right now. Good luck. Thank you so much, comrade. Appreciate you. Please don't worry about it. You can, and I always say this, don't give us money that you need, right? Don't donate to the institute money that you need to feed yourself and your family and take care of your everyday needs. You can help the institute a ton by liking the stream, leaving a comment on the stream like you just did, or sharing the stream especially. It is extremely helpful. So yeah, there's tons and tons of ways to help the institute without funding us financially. Definitely understand that in this exploitative capitalist system, not everybody just has oodles and poodles of money to share or put towards organizing. But appreciate you for sparing what you do have. So thank you so much. Bretton Woods system basics, exactly. That's what this U.S. dominated global financial system is called, the Bretton Woods system, and that's now crumbling. That's now coming to an end. The predominance of Western finance capital is being combated by BRICS, right? So we can't be dogmatic, right? We can't be like the Western Maoists. We can't say, well, in 1917, when Lenin wrote Imperialism, he said that imperialism is dominated by finance capital, right? By these giant banks and industrial capitalists that are concentrated into these massive cartels and trusts. Right, and because Lenin said finance capital bad, that means China bad because they're using finance capital. Like, there have been over 100 years of development since Lenin wrote that book, and it's still a very prescient book. It's still a very valuable book. It's a necessary book for understanding the development of capitalism after Marx and what historically preceded our current situation. Right, but you also have to look at the current global context to understand what China's doing. Right, the situation has changed. The IMF and the World Bank didn't exist when Lenin was writing that book. Right, the U.S. wasn't able to use the Bretton Woods system to wage economic warfare against countries they don't like and cut them off from financing. So what China's doing is throwing these countries a lifeline, right? Throwing them loans that aren't super high interest rate, that aren't going to trap these countries in debt, and that aren't going to come with strings attached. That's the other thing about the IMF and World Bank loans. They say, we'll loan you this money if you get rid of the minimum wage and you crush labor unions and you enact free trade laws. So Western corporations can easily bring over the resources that are being created in Africa, right? There's no tariffs on it, no protectionism, austerity, or what we call neoliberalism. So China's giving these countries a lifeline of finance with no strings attached. And then you have these people who are like, yeah, but it's finance capital, so it's capitalism, and I don't like it. Like, okay, you're not being realistic, right? You're pretending that Marxism is a religion. You're pretending that Marxism is a dogma, and because in 1917 Lenin criticized finance capital, that means there can never be a socialist form of finance capital. It's a totally different form of financing. It is a socialist form of financing. So. Yeah, people are ridiculous, though. Western Marxists have always been quite ridiculous on these points. Penis Dragger, thank you, Dennis Prager. Speaking of bourgeois media outlets that have an insane amount of money put towards marketing and put towards growing, Prager, an outlet with some of the worst videos I've ever seen, some of the least informative videos I've ever seen, videos chock full with misinformation that have millions and millions of views because of marketing and because of the money behind them. So thank you so much, Penis Dragger, for giving a boost to the Midwestern Marx Institute. We promise to use your generous donation to grow the Institute to advance the struggle for socialism. And yeah, power to the people, funding from the people, power to the people. We are the people's news outlet. And theoretical education-based institute. Solidarity with Penis Dragger, the natural antithesis to the Koch brother money. Yes, totally agree, Kyle. Basically, exactly what I was just saying. Thank you so much for matching that donation. Kyle's going crazy today. Kyle's just like, take that, capitalism. Thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you for being a member. Kyle's also a YouTube member, which is why he has that little circle next to his name. If you become a YouTube member of $10 or more, you get a copy of Carlos's book, or so I should say an ebook copy. You don't get a hard copy, but ebook copy if you're a YouTube member or a Patreon supporter of $10 or more. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. It's in our community tab on YouTube. So if you're a member, please take advantage of that and make sure you get yourself Carlos's book. It's a great book. I read it in like 2 days. It's fantastic, easy to understand, chock full of information. The purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism. It makes an argument in favor of China, and it basically lays out a path for what the Western left needs to do in order to get more serious and in order to really organize workers and overthrow our neoliberal, imperialist, finance capitalist dominated government. Solidarity, Kyle. Thank you so much. I got a really good deal on an auto insurance today, LOL. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I got to get health insurance soon. I just turned 26, so I've been just kicking it without health insurance, but it's scary whenever I get a toothache or something. I'm like, I should probably go to the doctor, but I don't want to pay $1 million to go to the doctor without insurance. So thank you so much, Kyle. Yes. Everyone's thanking Kyle. Even everybody in the chat. Appreciate you all. What if we already have the ebook? Can we choose another work of a comparable price? That's a great point, Jai. That's a great point. I want to say yes, but I just don't know how we would organize that. I want to say shoot me an email, but then I'm super scared that I'll forget. Let me think on that. And I will try to figure out a way to make that a thing, because that should be a thing. You should be able to pick a different book, a different ebook if you already have the purity fetish. Yeah, I'll let you know. Thank you, though. Next month is on y'all, LMAO. Appreciate you, Kyle. You're the man. Thanks for making it rain. Glad to be back on the membership rolls. You bet. You bet. All right, should we get into our first video? Let's go. We got another Philip DeFranco video. Y'all are probably sick of talking about Philip DeFranco, Philip the State Department at this point, but dude, he's just so bad. He's so bad. Every day, it's a worse video about Africa. And I told you, he's focusing on Africa right now because I don't know if his scripts are written for him by the CIA and the State Department and NATO, but they might as well be. Right, and that is what NATO and the U.S. are concerned about right now. They're concerned about all their puppet dictatorships being overthrown in Africa, and then those countries moving to side with China and Russia and the rising multipolar alliance in the East. So most of the propagandists, most of the scumbags and liars who serve the Western imperialists and finance capitalists like Philip DeFranco are focusing their propaganda on Africa right now. So that's why I think it's really important to debunk a lot of it and go through it. And obviously, Philip DeFranco is getting millions and millions of views on this video. And despite the fact that TikTok has a policy against misinformation,
Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Benin.
Many of our videos in 7
Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Benin say they'll participate in ECOWAS
misinformation. They've never, ever even given Phil as much of a slap on the wrist. Even when I have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that what Philip DeFranco is saying is misinformation, right? Even when I pulled up his video of him saying that Russia destroyed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and then showing the Seymour Hersh article and all the other evidence that it was the U.S. who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, that video is still up, right? Another of the video that we covered last week of him lying about Africa, still up, right? So as long as you side with NATO, as long as you side with the Western imperialists who control the TikTok app now, your content will stay up. You're allowed to report misinformation. And of course, when the U.S. government forced ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, to hand over their Western servers, their American servers, to a company called Oracle with deep ties to the CIA, TikTok appointed a bunch of former NATO operatives and a bunch of former national security agents to be content managers at TikTok. This was reported in depth by Alan McLeod of Mint Press News. We've covered it about 1,000,000 times, but that was when our accounts started getting banned in mass and all our videos started getting taken down for misinformation. In total, as soon as Oracle took over, they erased 320,000 accounts that were supposedly tied to Russia. So anything, going against the NATO narrative was just wiped off the app completely. Truly disgusting. And these opportunists like Philip DeFranco have jumped at the chance to simp for NATO and make a lot of money doing it. So nothing but the utmost contempt for this guy, an absolute spineless coward, someone who's been on doing YouTube videos since 2006 and who completely sold out to the most evil people in the world so that he can continue to make money. So here's his video.
Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Benin say they'll participate in ECOWAS's military coalition to restore democracy in Niger. China has told its citizens in the country to prepare for an emergency. America has put Niger on its do-not-travel list and has ordered all non-essential government employees and their families to leave, with the U.S. also telling the ousted president of Niger.
Let me know if you can hear it, because we're using a different computer setup today while I'm at my cousin's house.
That it remains committed to restoring democracy. New reports say the junta was in contact with Mali and Burkina Faso before they even took power, suggesting that at some level Russia and Wagner have been involved since the very start. With us now 3 days away from the war deadline and no sign of diplomatic solution on the horizon, follow to stay in the loop.
All right, so that's Phil's video. Now let's go to our buddy, the same guy that we listened to last time, who goes by the frustrated black leftist.
Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Benin say they'll participate in
destroy Philip DeFranco with facts and logic.
ECOWAS's military coalition to restore democracy.
So this is actually going to wind up being a complete and utter mess. What I think the West does not understand about Africa is that citizens of Africa, West Africa, members of South Africa in particular, feel as though the West and the rest of the world, in all honesty, has always come to Africa to exploit and extract. Most African citizens do not support their governmental leadership or their presidents. So this idea that ECOWAS can just start a military operation and invade, when French West Africa in particular, I'm talking about the previous colonial territories of France, have extreme anti-French sentiment. I do not think that the United States, France, and the rest of the NATO coalition and their African, governmental agents of democracy, because these motherfuckers are not democratic. They only have power because the West lets them have power, and they treat their citizens like shit. None of these citizens, not even the citizens of Nigeria, do not like the fucking government. Like, it's like...
We covered last week how the last elections in Nigeria were heavily influenced to the point of being rigged by the U.S. to put in power a puppet dictatorship. And it looked like the people were going to elect a more pro-African candidate, a candidate who had more intention of taking care of the citizens of Nigeria. So the U.S. came in, funneled a bunch of money into that election, helped rig the election, and put in a U.S. puppet dictatorship. So now you see why, right? Now that there's a coup in Niger that's against the West and against French military occupation of Niger, Nigeria is like, yeah, we'll invade to restore order. We'll invade on behalf of the U.S. And it's not their people saying that; it's their U.S. puppet dictatorship of a government saying that. Their people don't even agree with their government. So,
not understanding black people at all, or having any connections to people who live in Africa. The only people who benefit from these governments are the bourgeois, like capitalists, people with wealth. Everybody else is suffering. If this military operation happens, and this is just a prediction, and the West's goal is to stop Russia from building relations in Africa. If this happens, they finna to learn. Listen, African people on the continent are tired of the West shit. And now you trying to make them fight wars against fellow Africans? You trying to have black people kill fellow black people on the fucking motherland? When I tell you the West is about to shoot themselves in the foot, I mean like they are going to take a shit. When I tell you they are about to shoot themselves in the foot, I do not think they understand what is coming. And this will be a catastrophe. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news.
So it seems like he thinks this could trigger a chain of events, right? That the people of Nigeria aren't about to go into Niger and start fighting a war on behalf of the West, because they know that the West installed a puppet dictatorship in their country. They know that their government doesn't represent them. So they're not about to sign up to go, take out another country who's trying to control their own destiny, who's trying to kick out Western influence. And this is a really cool little comment here from Astro Magic. Speaking as a Nigerian, I would love nothing more than for the citizenry of my own country to have control over their own destinies. Right. I mean, that's really cool that we have a Nigerian in the chat. That's an awesome perspective to get on this issue, but it's exactly it. These people have no loyalty to the West. Their people, their actual soldiers have no loyalty to the Western puppet dictatorship. They want to control their own destiny. They want to move away from that too. So if you try to send them into a war on behalf of NATO and Niger, who knows what's going to happen? Who's to say they don't turn their guns on their own government and say, you know what, you're a Western puppet dictatorship. We're not fighting a war for you. And in fact, we're going to overthrow you just the same way they did in Niger. Right? The coup, which is really like a revolution, was led by the military, very similar to what happened in Venezuela in 1992 when Hugo Chavez and a section of the military unsuccessfully tried to overthrow the government and then later came back and won an election. But you can have progressive revolutions that are led by the military, right? It's happened many times, which is kind of counterintuitive to think about because our military acts as an apparatus of imperialism in the U.S. They've done so many horrible things, but Hugo Chavez, Comandante Chavez, was the military leader, right? So you can have sections of the military that are backed by the people, backed by the working class, backed by the masses, who oust these governments and set up a more pro-working class, a more revolutionary government. Who's to say that doesn't happen in Nigeria when the U.S. and NATO try and sick them on their neighbors, try and sick them on other African countries? It's highly likely. Those in power have also contributed to many of our tribes beefing with each other for decades, right? And this, having a common enemy in the U.S. and NATO and France and all these Western countries occupying Africa might lead to more African unity, not just in Nigeria itself, but more Pan-African unity, which is always what Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and other African revolutionaries have advocated for. They've said our country's lines, our borders are drawn by the Western colonizers. And what we need going forward is for the continent to unite against the Western colonizers. So if all this U.S. meddling in Africa serves to unite the African continent, the African people against the West, that will spell disaster for the Western Empire, right? And that will be a great thing overall for the struggle for socialism and the move towards a more equitable, multipolar world, a world that isn't just completely dominated by Western powers. Thank you so much for sharing that, Astro Magic. Appreciate it. Really nice to have a Nigerian in the chat to give their perspective. Oops, I just knocked over my microphone. I have my old microphone today. If my voice doesn't sound that good, I tend to bring my backup mic when I'm traveling so I don't wreck my nice mic. Plus, I have like a big box that I have to attach it to because it's not a USB microphone. It's the other kind, whatever you call it. Even here in Brazil, Americans do that stuff. They took out Dilma Rousseff with an intern coup and illegitimate impeachment. Exactly, right. That's the kind of stuff they've been doing in Africa, Brazil. I mean, the story of Africa and the story of Latin America is quite similar, right? In the fact that they're exploited, and every time they try and move towards a revolutionary government that invests their own country's resources and labor in their own country, it's usually thwarted by a coup or something. Salvador Allende, the coup of Dilma Rousseff, they jailed Lula in order to help Jair Bolsonaro win. Coup Hugo Chavez in 2002, but he was brought back. Countless examples. For a more contemporary example, the 2019 CIA coup in Bolivia that put in power a fascist dictatorship. But in a lot of cases, the countries have combated these coups and become even more unified against the West because of this. Like Lula's now in power in Brazil, right? So ultimately, it didn't work. In Bolivia, the MAS, the Movement for Socialism Party, still in power. Luis Arce, Evo Morales' economic advisor, was able to win the next election in the country amid mass suppression from the U.S.-backed fascist forces in Bolivia. And Evo was returned to the country. So the socialists are still in power. Now Evo will run for president in the next election. He'll be one of the favorites to win. So, it's like the U.S. meddling and the U.S. coups isn't working like it used to. Either is the U.S. propaganda and the anti-communist Red Scare propaganda, right? These people are weary of it. They're sick of it. And, the recent developments in Africa may just serve to unify the Pan-African movement against the U.S. Maybe that's me being too optimistic, right? Maybe that's wishful thinking. But I really see it as a step in that direction, like our comrade here is saying. Hi, I'm Philly DeFranco, and this is what the State Department wants you to be scared of right now, especially as Ukraine is getting wrecked. Oh, yes, Kyle. Kyle, we got to have you on the stream soon. I know I invited you on the other day. I can't do it today because I got practice coming up here. But at some point, and we have our Discord server set up so that we can invite people on the show so that we can take calls. Definitely want to start doing that sooner rather than later. So look forward to that in the next week when I'm back in my normal streaming situation in my studio. But yeah, it's hilarious. And thank you so much, Kyle. Kyle making it rain again. Goodness gracious. I almost feel bad with all the super chats we're getting. Sent in the Discord stream suggestions, Nigerians supporting Russia and the coup and talking about why Western media source with scary music and all. Well, thank you very much. We'll definitely react to that at some point, if not today. Nigerians supporting Russia and the coup, talking about why. Actually, we might listen to that today. I'm going to check that out. As soon as we got to finish this TikTok, and then I'll jump into that. Thank you so much, Kyle. You're the man.
Nor do I want to jinx us or make a false prediction, but this very well may be the precursor to an actual next World War conflict. And it will cause immediate decay, an ethnic decay, I predict. And I think Black people and people who are descendants of the global South everywhere will learn and revolt against their Western overlords. This will be a critical mistake. It will be a horrible mistake.
Yeah, so he basically said the same thing I did. He said, I don't want to jinx it. I said I don't want to be overly optimistic, but there's definitely a chance of that happening. Or at least it'll be a step in that direction towards unifying African countries against the U.S. Yeah. Can't seem to find your that video you sent me, Kyle. I'm gonna react to that next. Oops. But if I can't find it, we'll just move on, and then I'll react to it next time. Oh, found it. All right, let's watch this next. And then I'll answer the next two super chats we got. Thank you to everyone sending super chats. I cannot, with words, express my appreciation for you. All I can say is that PragerU and the Daily Wire and all these bourgeois propaganda outlets are being funded by gazillionaires. They're being funded by the Wilkes brothers, the Ferris brothers, the Koch brothers, right? But we're being funded by you. That's why we represent you, the working class, and that's why we'll never argue for making your lives worse. We'll always fight in your interests and stave off the corporate donors and the corruptors who might seek to change us and put us on another path. Our funding comes from you, so our interests are in protecting you and spreading information, spreading education that will help the working class in the class struggle. Yeah, so Western media was freaking out because like Russian flags are being waved at these events, or at when the people in Niger are hitting the streets, right, and demanding that the Western powers leave and that they not intervene in the country and that they support the new government. And the West is like, look, they're waving Russian flags. Surely, Russia was behind this. And how evil is it that they're moving towards allying with Russia? They're evil, just like Russia. They're comic book villains like Russia. But really what it is these people know that Russia and China are going to offer them an alternative to the U.S., right? They now can trade and be financial partners with these countries in the East rather than the United States. So them waving these Russian flags is them saying, we need to move away from the West. We need to move away from the U.S. We need to move away from the capitalist Western imperialists and move towards the East. And obviously Russia right now is having this direct confrontation with NATO, a direct confrontation with the West. So it's less, that's what they're saying, is we no longer support Western global domination. And we do support and want to get closer with these powers who are fighting against Western global domination, like Russia. Right? They're burning the French flag and waving the Russian flag. The symbolism could not be more clear. Right? They're saying we want to trade with Russia because Russia doesn't have troops here. Russia doesn't have military bases here. Russia isn't exploiting us. They just want to trade with us. Obviously, that doesn't mean Russia's perfect, but it's them saying we want to move away from Western dominance and towards forging closer ties with the East. I had something else I wanted to say about that, but it slipped my mind. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. And for someone who has MSNBC brain, who has CNN brain, who's bought into the Russia boogeyman and just thinks Russia is evil and, the U.S. is fighting for democracy and freedom, whereas Russia is an evil imperialist dictatorship, right? They play this scary music and try to make something like this seem terrifying. Right? Like, look, Russia is taking over this country, or this country's run by evil dictators just like Russia who hate our American freedom and democracy. When really it's America and France and the Western powers who are autocratically in an authoritarian fashion occupying these countries and making sure that their resources and labor are free for Western exploitation. Whereas Russia doesn't, have military bases and military presence in the country. They just want to do normal trade deals, right? So it's the U.S. that's acting dictatorial, but they invert reality. And yeah, I just wonder how different this video would look for someone who watches MSNBC all day compared to how we look at it. The West called for the restoration of order, the restoration of neoliberal order, the return of French troops who run this country's government like a puppet. That's what they mean by order. So very interesting video. Thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing that. You see how massive the protests are right now. People are in the streets. You know, people are getting serious. And that's happening in places in Latin America too, like Peru. You know, all these massive uprisings against U.S. involvement and U.S. meddling. Unfortunately, in Peru, Pedro Castillo was just ousted in a Western-backed coup, and in a coup backed by Peruvian oligarchs. But the people are not happy about it, and they're not taking it lying down. So solidarity with all these people for sure. I really wanted to read this. Sebastian says, friends are coming over soon. I'm making him watch your recent Xinjiang live stream. Wish me luck. That's so cool. That is so cool. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Let me know how it goes. You're going to have to tell me in the Discord or something how it goes. And then let me know if they think anything I'm saying is wrong, or if they have any like criticisms of it, because that can teach me how to better present these issues to people. But that should be a good video because it's fairly unbiased, I guess. At least the video I'm reacting to isn't like a hardcore socialist or hardcore communist. It's just giving someone, you know, the facts about Xinjiang. And then I add, obviously, facts about what the U.S. has been doing in Afghanistan and the Xinjiang region to try and support separatism and regime change and destroy China. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear how that goes. So best of luck to you, comrade. Thank you so much for the $5. Sebastian's a longtime supporter of Midwestern Marx. A lot of the videos that we watch, a lot of the TikToks that we watch are from Sebastian. He's in the Midwestern Marx Discord, which you can join by becoming a $1 Patreon supporter, or a $10 one if you want. But if you become a $1 Patreon supporter, you can join the Discord, then we'll never kick you out. You're a member for life, and you can send me videos and topics to the stream react suggestions, that's the #1 place I go to find content to react to on the stream. So if you want me to talk about certain topics or talk about certain videos or articles, that is the best place to send it by far. Sebastian is really consistently posting really good things to react to in there. So I think actually both the videos that I had today, or both the stories I had today to talk about, were from Sebastian. Oh, there's some interviews in this video. Here, let's continue watching this for a bit. I think I ended this video a little bit prematurely. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Appreciate you always, brother. Let's listen to some of these Nigerians.
Ici, c'est la jeunesse, il n'y a aucune coloration politique. C'est la jeunesse nigérienne qui s'est retrouvée ici pour apporter son soutien à notre force de défense et de sécurité. S'il y a des jeunes qui font sortir le drapeau de la Russie.
So this is what I mean by there can be a progressive military coup, right? It's not like the military violently seized power of the government for themselves, or it's not like a bunch of mercenaries backed and trained by the U.S. or trained by AFRICOM seized power of the government on behalf of the West, right? The military has the backing of the people. They have the backing of the youth of the country. There are people in the streets supporting the security forces and supporting kicking out France, right? So just because it's a military coup doesn't mean it's not progressive or it's not revolutionary. Did you get the iPad, Eddie? I did. Yes. Thank you so much, Fine Art Revolution. The people's iPad. And my TikToks have been fire ever since I got this thing. They've been well edited. They've been high definition. I'm able to do memes. Our TikTok account is blowing up again now. So thank you to every single person who helped donate for the people's iPad. including the fine art revolution. Thank you.
Si nous ne sommes pas contre, c'est parce qu'ils ont vu un peu dans la sous-région le rapport de coopération de certains pays avec la Russie. On sent qu'il y a un traitement d'égalité et c'est pourquoi ils ont fait sortir ces drapeaux.
So you hear him saying exactly what I've been saying. You know, Russia and China have been cooperating with countries in the region, whereas the West, France and the US have been colonizing countries in the region. So of course they're waving Russian flags. Why wouldn't they? Of course they're supporting Russia in their conflict against NATO and, you know, the US puppet state in Ukraine. Why wouldn't they? Why would they want countries that are going to occupy them, exploit them, and steal their resources when they could support a country that wants to cooperate with them and protect their sovereignty?
Nous avons l'or, nous avons le pétrole, et on vit comme des esclaves. Pourquoi jusqu'à quand? On ne pourra pas l'accepter. La base française du Niger doit quitter. On n'a pas besoin de Français pour nous sécuriser. La démocratie ne fonctionne pas parce qu'on n'a pas impliqué le peuple. Voilà. C'est le pouvoir du peuple pour le peuple. Le peuple n'est pas impliqué, c'est une question d'argent. On a peuporisé le peuple nigérien pour le faire dépendre de petites sommes. Et comme on a appauvri les gens, on leur donne 500 pour voter. Donc il n'y a pas de démocratie.
Of time.
Fascinating stuff. Great video, Kyle, as usual. Thank you so much for sending that. I did not have that planned today to react to, but that was perfect for what we were talking about. Got to hear directly from the Nigerian people what they think of this coup, what they think of the French occupation forces in their country, what they think of Russia. Right? It's not them being backed by Russia. It's not Russia doing what the U.S. does and training up a bunch of mercenaries and, you know, sections of the armed forces to overthrow a leader that they don't like. Right? Russia wants cooperation, and this coup came from the bottom up. Right? It could almost be described as a revolution enacted by the country's security forces, but with the backing of the masses. So fantastic. Solidarity with them. Kick out the dang U.S. Love it. Thank you, Kyle. I was on yesterday with Noah, but for sure. Oh, that's right. You guys did a stream, didn't you? That's awesome. Yeah, we want to have you on more whenever you want to do it, man. Thank you for another super chat. Yeah, would love to get you more involved with Midwestern Marx. So we love everything that you're doing, and you definitely have our line, theoretically, like pretty much exactly. Which is, I mean, that's just the line that you come to if you spend a lot of time organizing in the U.S., right? You're not going to become, if you're serious about organizing in the U.S., you're not going to become a Marxist-Leninist Maoist who's like dogmatic and supports Gonzalo and the Shining Path and all this weird stuff and condemns China. You're gonna find you're gonna fall pretty close to the Midwestern Marx or Marxist, traditional Marxist-Leninist line. So thanks, Kyle. I don't see the West being able to topple the government of Niger. The U.S. is out of ammo, and France is reliant on the U.S. for logistics and bombs like in Mali in 2013 or Libya in 2012. Very, very good point, Roadside Revolutionary. The left is out of ammo, and this was one of the main contentions that I had with Vush, the NATO Sim Vush, in our debate. Was I was saying the U.S. is running out of ammo. They're being, not only is Ukraine being demilitarized, but NATO is in a lot of ways, right? And the U.S. isn't, their army is made for fighting a bunch of small conflicts around the world. They're not necessarily equipped to fight against another superpower, which I guess Niger, isn't like a superpower like Russia. But if the people are really dedicated to the revolution, if they're really behind this new government and they're ready to fight for it, and then the U.S. is unable to turn Nigeria and these other countries against Niger, and they're unable to get these countries to join NATO's war effort then it's going to be very hard to do, right? It's going to be very hard to overthrow this government as long as this government is vigilant, right? As long as they understand that the U.S. is going to try and assassinate them and they protect their leadership, like Cuba did with Fidel Castro when they tried to assassinate him 600 times. As long as they remain vigilant, which I think they will be, they obviously aren't naive about the imperialist powers. It's going to be very, 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 very difficult for the U.S. and France to do anything. They're too heavily focused on Ukraine. You know, they barely have enough weapons in Ukraine, and who knows how many people will even fight for them in Africa anymore. Right? There are always going to be U.S.-backed security forces and military forces and mercenary forces in these countries, but will it be enough to overthrow this coup that's backed by the majority of the people of Niger? I don't know if they will. I mean, this is hard too because I'm not a military analyst, right? I focus more on economics, and I mean to do geopolitical analysis, which is what I focus on. You do need to do some military analysis, and I'm getting better at it, even though that was always what bored me in the past, learning about tanks and guns and stuff. So don't take my word for it when I say that the U.S. is out of ammo and they're not going to be able to overthrow Niger, because I don't know. And even if I was a military analyst, I would need to look into it specifically and see what the U.S. is going to try and do. But I do know that the U.S. is running out of ammo. The U.S. in NATO is running out of ammo. And remember when I said that to Vaush in the debate, and he acted like it was the stupidest thing he's ever heard? And now every day there's another report that proves us right and him wrong. I wonder if he'll issue an apology, if he'll issue a retraction and put out the truth for his audience. That was sarcasm. He won't. He's a NATO simp. He's a liar. He's a propagandist. Came because Voosh. I'm here from that guy, and his takes were bad. I don't get why he tries to make MLs out to be insane when MLs usually have the best takes. Thank you so much. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, there have been so many people who said, you know, it was so useless to debate Vaush. It's so useless to even talk about these people or combat their arguments. And I have been strongly against that idea from day one. I'm like, there are so many new people who joined Midwestern Marx, who started studying Marxism, Leninism, and actually reading, unlike Vaush, who doesn't read at all. There have been so many people who started doing that since I debated Vaush. Like, we've been able to steal so many people from his audience and push them towards an actual revolutionary position, that it was absolutely worth it. I would do it again. I would do it again 1,000,000 times. We gained like hundreds of subscribers from that, and you know, Vaush was like, "You're just clout sharking. You're just trying to get new subscribers." Like, yeah, no shit, dummy. Obviously, I'm trying to get people to stop watching your NATO propaganda garbage and start learning about theory and start learning about imperialism and start learning about, you know, the actual geopolitical situation and the actual material conditions here at home. I want people to actually read, not follow some lazy gamer who's only streaming, who only streams about drama and is just trying to milk you of money. Is just trying to get rich off of political commentary. Obviously, I want to suck people from your audience, but it's not to gain clout. It's because I actually care about socialism. It's because I actually care about educating people. It's because I actually care about the class struggle around the world. Read, read, read. Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Based. I'm glad you all agree. Because, I mean, I don't blame people for watching Vaush. Like, we're all at different stages in our political development, man. And Vaush calls himself a socialist. Calls himself a libertarian socialist, which, if, you know, you've been taught your whole life that the Soviet Union's evil, but then you look around at the capitalist system around you and you're like, this is kind of evil too, right? Libertarian socialism sounds like it might make sense, right? Oh yeah, socialism without the government. That sounds like it might make sense. I'll watch this Vaush guy, right? So it's important to deconstruct his arguments and show how he's just a neoliberal imperialist for people in his audience. You know, I care about those people. I don't think they're all evil. Debate Destiny. Send the rad libs to the dustbin. Soon, Kyle. Soon we will take on Destiny. The blue-haired neolib. Not that there's anything wrong with having blue hair, but There is something wrong with Destiny, though. So I would love to debate Destiny. I just don't know. Should we start a campaign? I tweeted at him the other day. I said, "Debate me, coward." It was just kind of a joke, but maybe I should make a TikTok calling him out. Last time I did that, it didn't work. Who did I call out? What's that kid's name? It was some guy who used to be a conservative and then became like a liberal after he debated Vaush. What's that guy's name? I can't think of it. You guys know who I'm talking about? Vaush is such a grifter. He is. Xander Hall? No, Hunter Avallone. Yes, that's who it was. Hunter Avallone. I challenged him because he actually seems intellectually honest. Like he actually stopped being a conservative and started being a liberal. And I was like, well, hey, why not make him into a socialist? So I wanted to have a debate / conversation with him, and that's like all he does now is debates. But I don't think he's that interested in debating substance. He's more interested in destroying conservatives and getting TikTok clips. But such is grifting, such is life. You want a what, Eddie? I don't know. Someone clip that. Yeah, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. Someone clip it, though. By the way, some people have been clipping our Twitch clips lately, and I don't know if you guys can clip YouTube. That is so freaking helpful for me. That's how you can support Midwestern Marks if you don't want to give us a bunch of, or if you don't have finances or whatever. If you make Twitch clips for us, that makes it so easy for me to make YouTube videos and TikToks out of our streams. So shout out to everybody who's been doing that. I appreciate the crap out of that. Yeah, that just makes my life so much easier. Because again, we're not PragerU, we're not the Daily Wire. We don't have a bunch of investors, so we can't hire an editor and a bunch of producers. So we do all the editing, all the production, all the writing ourselves, right? I spend hours and hours and hours editing clips and re-uploading them onto YouTube. So when I open a stream and I see that somebody's already like highlighted clips for me, like what a relief that is. It's so awesome. Bikes are way better and cooler than cars. Apolitical idealist, absolutely. Yes, I think the way that we plan our cities and that we plan transportation under capitalism is quite silly. And they've proven this. I've showed you guys my presentation about the livable cities, which are these public housing experiments where they give people public housing, but then there aren't really cars connecting everything. And this is how a lot of European cities are built anyways. There's way more walking in Europe than there is in the US just in general. But actually, the place I'm at right now in Minnesota is there's a ton of parks and walking paths. But anyways, what they tried doing in these public housing experiments was making a bunch of parks, making a bunch of what they call in urban planning third spaces or third places, meaning places where people can meet and socialize outside of the home, right? So things to get people outside, like community gardens, right? And all the houses, rather than being connected by roads, are connected by bike paths. And everyone just parks their cars in a parking lot. You can take your car when you need to leave the neighborhood. But everything within the neighborhood is connected by walking paths and bike paths. And there's also the other thing that they did is tried to plant a bunch of trees and plant a bunch of wildlife to keep people connected with the biosphere. So these are all things that have been studied and have been proven to increase human happiness, right? They've been proven to decrease depression and create a better standard of life because you're socializing with other people, you're spending time outside the home, you're not in your car driving everywhere, you can walk and bike and walk your dog. So it's a very simple thing, you know, changing the style of urban planning, changing the style of city design that we could move to under socialism and vastly improve people's lives. Like there is a crisis of depression, there's a crisis of alienation in this country, and it started to frustrate me that every time there's a freaking mass shooting, I log on Twitter and the Democrats are using it as an opportunity to talk about guns, right? Guns. Like, sure, yeah, we should have some common sense gun laws. But how about alienation, right? How about increasing social connection? How about some alternative solutions other than just, the guns, right? I know that's your political agenda and you're using an event to try and push your political agenda, right? But there are other things that we can do to decrease alienation, decrease isolation, decrease depression, and therefore decrease mass shootings. And one of them is creating livable cities, right? Planning out our cities and the places where we live based on what's best for humanity, based on what's best for the people who live there, not based on what's best for the landlords and the local businesses or the local capitalists. So urban planning is so interesting to me. We need to bring a civil engineer on board Midwestern Marx. My brother's an engineer, and I gave him capital when he graduated, so hopefully he reads it and then becomes a civil engineer and a socialist urban planner or something. Just clip a call out and send it. We can boost it. Oh, that's a good point. Destiny! I'm tired of you being a cuck and not debating me. It's time. Marxism versus liberalism. Bring it on. How about that? Is that good? Thank you again for sending us another super chat, Kyle. Kyle sent us about $700 this stream, so appreciate you. Someone already said it. The cuck king. Ah! Thoughts versus Trots on Lenin permanent revolution? Yeah, I agree with. I mean, that was more Trots versus Stalin, honestly. Like, Stalin wanted socialism in one country and Trots wanted the permanent revolution. I know the idea of permanent revolution is in Venezuela, they kind of have this Trotskyist bent to their revolution. I have no problem with that, even though I'm not a Trotskyite. I just think like the idea of permanent revolution is ridiculous. Like, we need to build socialism I mean, if you say, I support permanent revolution rather than building socialism in one country, right? Which is what Trotsky was arguing. We can't build socialism in one country. We need to just keep fighting the revolution. Like, no, you need to increase people's material conditions in that country. Otherwise, they're not going to keep just supporting socialism. They're not just going to support it to support it. People need to see their standard of living raised. They need to see their material conditions bettered, like what happened in the early years of the Soviet Union, Cuba, China, right? That's how you get people to support socialism, the party, and support revolution. And then you can support or back revolutionary movements around the world. You can keep arguing for global revolution and ultimately permanent revolution, but that doesn't mean you have to abandon socialism in one country, right? You can have socialism in one country and support revolutionary movements all over the world, which is what Stalin did, right? The USSR's foreign policy was completely different than China's, right? They were literally saying, we are a base of support for the other socialist countries, and we're going to, give money and give support to revolutionary movements around the world. So how is that not supporting global revolution or quote unquote permanent revolution, right? They just did it while they were also building socialism in one country, right? So I support the idea of socialism in one country, even though it's siege socialism. You're going to have to do it while facing economic warfare and intervention and attacks from the West and from the capitalists. But that doesn't mean you abandon socialism in one country. And wasn't Trotsky arguing ridiculous things like when Germany invaded France? He was saying we shouldn't help France. We shouldn't fight fascism because France isn't socialist, right? Because they're a capitalist country, right? He was saying insane stuff like that. He was saying a lot of things that would have helped the Germans and would have helped the Nazis and Hitler rather than the Soviets, and bad-mouthing the Soviet Union, bad-mouthing the socialists and Stalin all around the world as they were fighting Hitler. Right, so he's throwing all this shade and trying to turn people against the Soviet Union as they're battling fascism, as they're fighting the Nazis. Right, so it's just, I don't have that much respect for Trotsky. I have no respect for Trotsky. But I have a lot of friends who are Trots, and I have a lot of good friends who are Trots, and there are a lot of good academics who are Trots. And my favorite country in the world, Venezuela, has this weird Trotskyite bent in their revolution against authoritarianism, in favor of permanent revolution. So it's a complicated issue. And I don't talk about it that much because Trotsky's dead, Stalin's dead. It doesn't matter too much anymore. But you know, there's definitely a Trotskyite to neocon pipeline that's a problem too. But, yeah, great question. Thank you so much, Daniel, for your good question and for your super chat. Geez, I'm not even going to be able to get into my other video today or my other story. We're getting way too many super chats. I'm cool with it. Appreciate the crap out of all of you. We've had 21 super chats this stream. Oh my gosh. You guys are insane. Thank you so much. Again, I promise that every expenditure that we make with Midwestern Marx and everything that we do, we think about very deeply, because we, you know, feel a great responsibility. The fact that you guys are funding us, the fact that you guys are working class people being exploited and being paid, you know, measly wages, and you're saving up a little bit of that wage to give towards the Midwestern Marx Institute, to give towards theoretical education and furthering the class struggle. You know, we take that very seriously, and we take using your money very seriously. So we try and only invest in things that are really, really going to help further the class struggle, such as the People's iPad. Posting is a lot of work, and you do it well. I'm also in Minnesota. Oh, cool. Cool. Are you living in one of the apartments that they have for artists? There's one of those across the street where I'm at. Thank you very much. Posting is a lot of work. People don't you know, it's easy to underestimate if you don't make videos, like how much effort actually goes into planning and doing and editing a stream. But I love it. You know, it's not hard to work hard on something that you truly believe in, as much as I believe in this, you know, and furthering theoretical education and socialist propaganda. So thanks so much, Fine Art Revolution. Consistent donor. Gave us $50 towards the People's iPad, so paid for a good chunk of the People's iPad. Thank you very much, Fine Art Revolution. Appreciate you always. And check out their Instagram account, the Fine Art Revolution, if you want to see a bunch of cool revolutionary art. It's been one of the best follows that I've had in a while. So actually, I need to get into this next story here before I gotta leave for wrestling practice, but I do want to show you guys this because it's sick. Oops, not fine arts. I typed in fine art socialism. I just renamed you. Dang it. Get out of here. Sorry. Oh, sorry, y'all. I messed up again. The Fine Art Revolution. Oh my gosh, I messed up again. I clicked on the wrong thing. It's the Fine Art Revolution on Instagram. There we go. Great follow. Revolutionary art is one of the most important things, one of the things that we need in this world right now. Right? Not everybody's a super intense reader. Not everyone loves reading nonfiction. Not everyone likes listening to me and Carlos and Noah lecture about theory on stream. Right? We need different ways to open people's minds to socialism and to re-articulate their consciousness. We need more Ursula Le Guin's, the fantasy writer and socialist who wrote the Earthsea series, which is a fantasy series that's explicitly socialist and anti-capitalist and anti-racist. So that kind of stuff is so powerful. You know, there's so much power in film and books, fiction books, and any kind of artwork. There's so much there, so much possible. It's such a powerful medium of reaching people, right? And the streams are too, and the TikToks are too. You know, that's a form of art in itself, I guess. But you know, we need more revolutionary art in every aspect. We need more revolutionary pottery. We're actually going to talk about art today. I forgot. We're going to talk about how the CIA supported modern art. Yeah, that'll be the last story we cover. Militant vegans should redirect their anger at capitalism. Absolutely. Absolutely. Quit yelling at people for eating meat. Start targeting the factory farms and the capitalist farming system that allows for terrible conditions for animals. Thank you so much, Apolitical Idealist, another fantastic and consistent supporter of Midwestern Marx. City planning brought me to the left. Oh, interesting. Interesting, Garden State. Yeah, I imagine that's the case for a lot of like civil engineers too, or people who live in big cities. You said you're in New Jersey, right? Like, yeah, there's so much that could be done. I used to give a presentation on this. I still have the presentation, the slideshows that I used to give in college about city planning and how it could be more human-centered rather than profit-centered. But yeah, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. Appreciate it a ton. Kyle, again, Kyle's now giving us $800 this stream. Thank you so much, Kyle. You are going crazy today. You're the man. Trotsky was a national nihilist again. He felt the only good the Soviets could do was export revolution regardless of the cost to Russia because he thought Russia was too backwards to do anything. Wow, that's such a good point, dude. And I've never, people know this, I've never really dug into the work of Trotsky. I've never read him systematically. But that's true, right? That's true that his theory was nationally nihilistic. He didn't think that Russia could build socialism. He didn't think they could industrialize and teach their people to read and build socialism in one country. So he's just like, the best thing they can do is export revolution. That's a form of national nihilism, right? And that's what I like to say when people say America can't have a revolution because we're too bad, we're too morally evil, and our history was too bad. Like, look at Imperial Russia, dude. Look at Imperial Russia. Carlos was saying the other day, our working class is nothing compared to theirs when it comes to bigotry, when it comes to anti-Semitism and racism and backwardsness, especially among the peasants, who they were saying, no, we need a worker-peasant alliance, right? We can work with these peasants. They're not too backwards. And yet you have Americans who will say, like, oh, you know, there's too many Trump supporters who are racist. We can't have a revolution. Shout out to Jay Sakai. They accept this national nihilistic thing. They're like, America's imperialist. You can't have a revolution in an imperialist country. Russia was one of the imperialist nations. They were probably the weakest one. They were the weakest link in all the capitalist imperialist nations fighting each other for the colonies in World War I. But they were imperialist. They were backwards. They were bigoted. They had a huge problem with anti-Semitism. But Lenin didn't say, you know, Russia's too evil. Russia's too bad to have a revolution. We just need to give up. No, he said we need to go to like the Black Hundreds, this group of anti-Semitic political party made up of mostly peasants, and we need to disrupt their meetings, disrupt what they're doing, and then win those people to socialism, right? Take them away from these bigoted ideologies, from these backwards ideologies, from this false consciousness, and re-articulate their consciousness towards socialism. Right? We don't need to condemn people and talk about how they're evil and talk about how our country's too backwards to ever become something great. It's the opposite. You re-articulate people's consciousnesses towards socialism, towards a process of construction that turns our country from what it is into something wonderful. Great point, Kyle. You're the man. Daniel again, thank you. Thoughts on what the vanguard in the U.S. would look like? How would that include decolonial theory? Are there any good books on democratic centralism? Well, read Lenin. Read Lenin. A lot of the decolonial theory that exists in the U.S. is like bourgeois decolonial theory that's all based on like identity politics and, you know, not actually decolonizing, right? Whereas decolonial theory is just was laid out basically, or the Marxist decolonial theory was laid out by Stalin in Marxism and the National Question, where he says in order to have, and it was laid out by Domenico Lacerdo in his tree graph that we've shown so many times. But Stalin says, in order to have socialism, in order to construct a new economy, you need to have national sovereignty. So that's why the Soviet Union supported all these African countries who were fighting against the colonizers, fighting for political independence, even if they weren't specifically socialist, right? Because these countries need to be able to determine their own destiny, to be in control of their own future, if they want to build socialism. You can't build socialism if your country's run by a puppet government controlled by the West, right? So they supported national sovereignty first, and then socialism second. So that's true decolonial theory, standing up for countries fighting for their own sovereignty, even if they're not explicitly socialist countries. What would a vanguard in the U.S. look like? It's impossible to predict, right? What we just need to do is start studying Marxism, start educating people about Marxism, start educating people about socialism, so that we can build a strong vanguard. But I think it would look very similar to what PSUV is in Venezuela, which is a coalition of all these socialist, left-leaning, progressive parties, right? The Communist Party in Venezuela isn't in power. It's the Socialist Party in Venezuela. And the Bolivarian Revolution was really a coalition of all the anti-imperialist and left-wing forces in Venezuela. So I think it could look very similar in the US, right? But what's more important right now in the US is getting socialists educated, right? Recruiting new people to the socialist movement who are competent, who are willing to learn and are willing to put in the work. And then teaching those people Marxism, educating those people about Marxism and the global situation and the domestic situation, right? If we do that, and if we keep educating workers and going to the workers and recruiting the workers, a vanguard party will emerge. It'll naturally emerge, a vanguard party or a vanguard coalition, right? We don't need you to go start a new party. There's a reason that the Midwestern Marx Institute is an institute. It's not a political party, because we don't need another political party in America right now, right? As the Dominican revolutionaries told Kyle Pettis when he was in the Dominican Republic, I believe that's where he was. The thing that they make fun of American Marxists for is the fact that we start a new party every week that's like, we're going to be the vanguard party. We're going to be the true socialist party in this country. And they're like, that's not what you need to do. You need to get dedicated, competent revolutionaries and educate them about Marxism for like 3 years straight, right? Then they can go into the workplaces. Then they can do community organizing and workplace organizing. And when they're equipped with Marxism as a tool, they're going to be able to educate and recruit new people to the movement. That then allows a vanguard party to emerge naturally, right? You can't force a vanguard party into existence. It needs to emerge naturally through theoretical development and the development of the consciousness of the proletariat. Great question, Daniel. Thank you so much. Good books on decentralism, anything by Lenin. He talks about it a lot. Greetings from the left coast. Pat Cummings, thank you so much, Pat. I was just telling my cousin about you and Angry or Murder Hornet Hot Sauce. I was talking about how good it is and how grateful I am to have met you and your podcast host partner, Greg. Let me give them a quick shout out here. Really appreciate the $20 super. Is extremely helpful to what we do, but probably the most criminally underwatched podcast on the internet ever created is run by Pat Cummings here and his buddy Greg. It's called the Coming from Left Field podcast. Carlos has appeared on it twice, I believe. I've appeared on it once. They are growing, but these are some of the most intellectual, well thought out, well done interviews and podcasts on the internet. So I love marketing these guys whenever I can. Please check out the Coming from Left Field podcast. They just talked to Dan Kovalik, our friend who has been on the stream, or who has been on the Midwestern Marx stream before. They interviewed Norman Finkelstein, very interesting. Revolutionary guy, big on Palestine. They interviewed this weird dude named Carlos Garrido. He's pretty ugly, which I wish they would have like blurred out his face or something because of how ugly he is.
Have these unchanging.
It'd be nice if we didn't have to look at this ugly mug while we listen to him, but he's pretty smart or whatever. So shout out to that guy. Thank you so much, Pat. The Coming from Left Field podcast. Did I post a link? Let me post the link. I don't know if I did or not. I totally forgot if I just posted a link here. But there's one if I didn't. Thank you, Pat. Permanent revolution makes no sense to me. It's like trying to build a house with a big one nail and not 1,000 nails in different spots at the same time. Exactly. That's a great analogy. Right. It's like trying to, disperse all your energy around the globe rather than focusing. My Wisconsinite accent just came out there bad. It almost sounded like I was from Canada. Without focusing all your efforts and your limited resources at home. Right? A country has limited resources. There's limited energy. There's limited organizers. There's limited resources. There's limited ability to act. So if you don't focus, at home on constructing socialism and you're just focused on funding revolutions abroad, that's going to lead to a disaster. And that's, why in many ways why China doesn't fund revolutions around the world anymore. That's one of the reasons that they don't, meddle in countries' politics. They're like, we'll trade with any country. We'll help them develop. but we're not going to, fund and arm a bunch of revolutionary movements and socialist movements the same way that the Soviet Union did. Do I wish CPUSA was getting guidance from the Communist Party of China and funding from the Communist Party of China that they could dump into Midwestern Marx? Yeah, I wish that was the case. I wish China did that, but I understand why they can't. They need to focus their energy at home. They need to focus on their own development and, building up other trade partners and having relations with other countries like Iran who aren't explicitly socialist. Right? If they were trying to fund communist movements in Iran rather than trading with them, that would ultimately hurt China, and it would hurt the rise of multipolarity. Socialist countries have to focus on building socialism in one country more so than they have to focus on influencing world politics. Thank you. One more super chat here, and then we'll get into our next segment, our final segment for today. This is insane. 26 super chats. I don't know if this has ever happened before. There was some Midwestern Marx turned 3 years old the other day, and we got about this many super chats, but maybe it's because today is the 3-year anniversary of our YouTube channel. It's the 3rd birthday of our YouTube channel, so maybe that's why people are so excited today. But thank you all so much. Thanks to everybody who sent a super chat. I got 26 now. That just blows my mind. My city is flooded with wannabe gangsters and with weapons. Yes, and those are conditions that are created by poverty, right? Gang violence. I don't know what you mean by wannabe gangsters, but crime is created or incentivized by poverty. There's no one who's just evil. Like my friend was talking to this guy the other day who was saying that all the gangsters in Chicago are just hunting white people. They're hunting white people because they're white and killing them because of the color of their skin. It's like, what are you talking about, dude? You think people just choose a life of crime because they're born hating people with white skin? No, people choose to rob banks or join gangs or do crimes because they don't have other opportunities and because they need money, right? Because they're in an economically destitute situation with no guidance from mentors and no opportunities. So the answer is investing in education, investing in social work, investing in social programs, investing in the development of human beings rather than just the development of capital. All right, finally, we'll move on to this. Modern art was a CIA weapon. This is what I was talking about when I was saying that revolutionary art is extremely important because art is a medium of communication that can reach a lot of people, which is the CIA recognized the importance in that. And if the CIA recognizes the importance of art, that means we should recognize it as well. Just like the CIA recognizes the importance of Marxism, so they've tried to push people away from it year after year after year. Anything that the CIA thinks is important, anything that the capitalist class thinks is important, the working class should think is important too, because obviously it has importance in the class struggle. That's my symbol for class struggle. This is from the Independent UK. Should I read it in a British accent because it's from the UK? For decades in art circles, it was either a rumor or a joke, but now it is confirmed as a fact. The Central Intelligence Agency used American modern art, including the works of such artists as Jackson Pollock. Boo! I wish I had my stream deck again so I could hit the boo sound effect. Boo! Robert Motherwell, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko as a weapon in the Cold War, in a manner of a Renaissance prince, except that it acted secretly. The CIA fostered and promoted American abstract expressionist painting around the world for more than 20 years. The connection is improbable. This was a period in the 1950s and the 1960s when the great majority of Americans disliked or even despised modern art. President Truman summed up the popular view, which he said, "If that's art, then I'm a Hottentot." What is a Hottentot? Is that some kind of British thing? I guess President Truman said it, so probably not. Yeah, I don't know anyone who actually likes modern art, but it certainly wouldn't have gained popularity organically. It certainly wouldn't have gained popularity unless it was CIA backed. As for the artists themselves, many were ex-communists, barely acceptable in the America of the McCarthyite era, and certainly not the sort of people likely to receive U.S. government backing. Well, if they're ex-communists, why wouldn't they receive CIA backing? Like, why would If they're ex-communist, clearly they're not communist anymore, and what are they advocating for then? Liberalism? Sounds like exactly the kind of people who the CIA would like, so that doesn't make any sense, independent UK. Why did the CIA support them? Because in the propaganda war with the Soviet Union, this new artistic movement could be held up as proof of the creativity, the intellectual freedom, and the cultural power of the US. Russian art, strapped into the communist ideological straitjacket, could not compete. Yeah, because why would you want, pictures of workers actually doing things, or, real art or portraits of people, like the art in Russia that was straitjacketed by communism, when you could tape a fucking banana to the wall and sell it for $1 million as part of a money laundering scheme? Right? Why would you want that darn straitjacketed Russian art that actually takes talent and skill and is actually nice to look at, when you could throw your own poop at a canvas and call it modern art? The existence of this policy, rumored and disputed for many years, has now been confirmed for the first time by former CIA officials. Unknown to the artists, the new American art was secretly promoted under a policy known as the Long Leash, arrangement similar in some ways to the indirect CIA backing of the journal Encounter, edited by Steven Spender. Yes, lots of things have been backed by the CIA to make the Soviet Union seem evil and America seem superior. Oh, I don't know why I did that part in the British accent. That was me. Adding commentary. Maybe I'm turning British. The decision to include culture and art in the U.S. Cold War arsenal was taken as soon as the CIA was founded in 1947. Dismayed at the appeal communism still had for many intellectuals and artists in the West, they decided to ban them all and start funding a bunch of anti-communist artists, because that's the only way to convince people that communism is actually bad, and intellectuals. The new agency set up a division, the Propaganda Assets Inventory, which at its peak could influence more than 800 newspapers, magazines, public information organizations, and public information organizations. They joked that it was like a Wurlitzer jukebox. When the CIA pushed a button, it could hear whatever tune it wanted to play across the world. So this just kind of details how the CIA set up these methods of funding modern artists and funding intellectuals who they like. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was the name of one of the programs that they used to fund a lot of CIA-backed intellectuals and artists. But here they talk about some of the things that were specifically funded. The next step came in 1950 when the International Organizations Division was set up under Tom Brady. In this office, which subsidized the animated versions of George Orwell's Animal Farm, which sponsored American jazz artists, opera recitals, the Boston Symphony Orchestra's international touring program. Isn't that interesting? That the CIA and the MI6 in the UK were supporting George Orwell, who was calling himself a socialist. As Hakim said, or paraphrasing something Hakim said, if George Orwell is one of your heroes as a socialist, you seriously need to rethink some things and read some history, because he was basically a CIA plant, or he was indirectly being helped by the CIA, and the CIA was propping up his work, turning his books into like animated movies and stuff like that. Its agents were placed in the film. I'm done with the British accent. Its agents were placed in the film industry and publishing houses, and even as travel writers for the celebrated Fodor guides. We now know that it promoted America's anarchic avant-garde movement, abstract expressionism. State Department also organized and paid for a touring international exhibition called Advancing American Art. So this is, you know how we always say that the CIA doesn't necessarily fund people directly all the time, like intellectuals and artists? They just they set the stage for these things to exist. Right, so they set the stage for these pro-U.S. State Department intellectuals and artists to come out. This is what I mean. So rather than fund artists directly, they'll fund an art exhibition that only accepts a certain kind of art, so that will draw in pro-State Department, pro-NATO artists, the kind of people they're looking for. Or they'll fund journals, certain academic journals, and say that you can only get in this journal if you call yourself a socialist, if you call yourself a Marxist, but then all the important positions you side with the capitalists, you side with the imperialists. Like Adorno and Horkheimer who were calling themselves Marxists and then supporting the Vietnam War, right? There were a lot of journals funded by the CIA that would accept that kind of work to try and change people's perception of what Marxism and socialism are. The work of Gabriel Rockhill has deconstructed that in depth. Aim of rebutting Soviet suggestions that America was a cultural desert. Yeah, by taping a banana to a canvas and selling it for $1 million, that really proves that American capitalist culture is leading the world. Made people mad at home. Yeah. I want to see if I want to read about Jackson Pollock because he's one of the more famous ones. And obviously, the kind of art that was doing well in the Soviet Union was socialist realism. So just depicting like workers at work or a family raising their kids. Like you guys have seen the old Soviet propaganda posters and stuff like that. That was the kind of art that was popular in the Soviet Union that this article said was straitjacketed by communist ideology. Because, you know, why would you want to see a statue of someone working with their hands or a portrait of somebody when you could see a Jackson Pollock painting where he just took like 6 different kinds of paints and whipped it at the canvas and was like, modern art. To pursue its underground interests, in America's lefty avant-garde, the CIA had to be sure its patronage could not be discovered. Matters of this sort could only have been done at 2 or 3 removes. Mr. Jameson explained, so that there wouldn't be any question of having to clear Jackson Pollock, for example, or do anything that would involve these people in the organization. So this is what I mean by they don't like directly funding people. They like putting on art exhibitions that are going to draw in people like Jackson Pollock who do the CIA's bidding, right? And then they indirectly prop these people up without ever saying, here's $100 to make some abstract art and counter the Soviet Union, Jackson Pollock. And then it makes it harder to trace back to them, which is why the work of Gabriel Rockhill and showing how the Frankfurt School and all these pseudo-Marxist thinkers, showing how the CIA backed them without funding them directly, that kind of work is so important. Couldn't have been any closer because most of them were people that had very little respect for the government in particular, none for the CIA. So if you had to use people who consider themselves one way or another to be closer to Moscow than Washington, well, so much the better, perhaps. Right. Right. Oh, they mentioned the Congress for Cultural Freedom up there. Contract to the Congress for Cultural Freedom to organize and curate most of its important art shows. Again, setting up art exhibitions, setting up art shows, setting up places where these avant-garde expressionist painters can sell their art and become rock stars, can become rock star artists without the CIA having to fund them directly. Same with Adorno, Horkheimer, and all these pseudo-Marxist thinkers who have been destroyed and embarrassed and had their legacies crushed by Gabriel Rockhill exposing their connection to the CIA. A lot of them weren't funded directly, but the journals that they were writing for were funded by the CIA directly or indirectly. And that allowed them to become rock stars. That allowed them to become very wealthy, very famous, and feel like they were the best philosophers in the world, when really they were nothing but useful idiots for the CIA. Sorry, Horkheimer. I'm not sorry, actually. You suck. That's what you get for supporting Vietnam. So yeah, the Congress for Cultural Freedom is a big deal. I don't know. The CIA is deeply involved in our culture, and not just in our media, but in our entertainment media. So that's why revolutionary art and real art is so important. The U.S. military also used to fund artists to tag along on military expeditions, war games, or during actual wartime. Very interesting. Very interesting. Probably portray the U.S. military in a positive light, I would imagine, as does almost every movie that comes out of Hollywood. They still might actually. This is where you got a lot of oil paints and aircraft carrier planes, battleships in action, etc. Wow. Interesting fine art revolution. I knew you would have some good stuff to say about this. I did not know that at all, but that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Genre painting, too. Trying to find anything else. It's the ideological aesthetic opposite of all things abstract expressionism. probably meaning Soviet realism. For sure. For sure. Fun fact, modern art started in the 1850s. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how ideology can be expressed through artwork like that, actually. Really interesting how, like, postmodernism and neoliberalism is expressed in, you know, the Jackson Pollock paintings, the abstract expressionism, whereas, you know, the everyday life of the proletariat and the working class and the Soviet people was expressed through socialist realism. Yeah. Let's look at some Jackson Pollock paintings. Let's look at what the CIA gave us. Like, dude, I used to look at these paintings and be like, couldn't a 5-year-old do this? I never, ever, ever, ever understood modern art. It just looked like a bunch of scribbles. And I felt like the people who enjoyed modern art were largely just being pretentious. They were like, look at what this says about society. And I'm like, what? It literally just looks like someone splattered a bunch of paint on a wall. You know, so it's pretty vindicating to know that this stuff was backed by the CIA. And we would have a lot more, you know, realistic paintings of the world and or like, you know, the kind of art that was coming out of the Soviet Union at the time. We would have a lot more stuff like that and less stuff like this if it wasn't for the CIA. Like, dude, it's literally just scribbles. Come on. Like, you gotta be kidding me. This is not art. Versus this is socialist realism, right? So rather than a bunch of scribbles on a page, it's pictures of people, right? And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a portrait that's drawn to look like real life, you know, or drawn to look like something real. Look at this. This one's a painting of the workers that's like not realistic. It's definitely got this artistic flair, but it's depicting the workers. It's depicting something real. It's depicting the experience of life, which is what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to reflect reality and reflect our everyday experiences, right? What reality do you see in a Jackson Pollock painting? What real life experiences are expressed in a Jackson Pollock painting? None, except for the real life experiences of a rich guy splattering paint on a canvas so that the CIA can boost it and sell it to a bunch of people. So, if you can't tell, I much prefer the style of socialist realism. So that's why art is so bad in America. All right, one more super chat. Would you ever consider going vegan? I've tried. I tried going plant-based. I can't compete and wrestle and lift weights on just plants. I can't. I feel like crap. I've tried it. But I mean, maybe I could if I supplemented. But right now, while I'm an athlete, it just doesn't make sense. Thank you so much, Simpy, for giving $2. And then for also being a YouTube member. Appreciate you very much. What's the CA before your dollar? What does that mean? Is that a California dollar? Just smacked my microphone again. Oop. Now it's going to fall over. What is that? Canadian dollar. Oh, cool. Oh, Canada. My home and native land. Very cool. Thank you all. Well, I think I'm probably going to call it for this stream. We've gone 2 hours and 8 minutes. It's been a fantastic stream. Covered everything we wanted. Got an insane amount of super chats. Thank you to all 20 people or so who sent super chats. Can't say how much I appreciate you all. That is vital to everything we do here at the Institute. But I'm running out of steam, so I'm going to call it and edit some of these, this stream into clips and re-upload them on YouTube. You can highlight sections of the stream if there's any part that you would want me to clip and put on YouTube specifically. So appreciate you all very much. We'll be back with another stream soon, and I'll play you out with the intro. Solidarity, everybody.
social and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.